I know what you want. You want to know what your cards are worth. I want to know what my cards are worth too. But it's actually a lot harder than it sounds. Comps are never 100% reliable, and there's a lot of different reasons for that. There's a lot of complicating factors as to why comps can never fully accurately predict what you can actually sell your card for. There's lots of nuances when it comes to pricing your cards and understanding what they're worth. And here at Sports Card Investor, this creates a lot of challenges for us. As we approach data, we've had to develop a whole philosophy around how we're going to treat data within our products like Market Movers and this Sports Card Investor app and our website when we're giving out comps and pricing information. Today, we're going to dive into all of this. We're going to dive into the pricing of cards, the comps of cards, the challenges, the best way to do it. And of course, the best person for this conversation, that would be our chief data expert here at Sports Card Investor, Tyler Nethercott, the head of our product team, the captain of Market Movers. We're going to bring him on and dive into the world of pricing and comps. Tyler, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Geoff.
Yeah, excited to dive into this with you today. We're going to nerd out a little bit when it comes to
do that.
Yeah, when it comes to sports card data. So, right off the bat, let me just ask you the most simple of questions. How can I tell what my cards are worth?
Yeah, I'm going to blow your mind with this. Are you ready?
Okay, let's go.
You sell it.
Okay.
You sell it. You
Yes.
sell your card, and then you know what it's worth. And there's
fair.
a lot more to it, but that is the simplest and shortest answer I can give you. We're done.
I would actually argue that even selling your card sometimes doesn't even tell you what it was worth.
That's
because
true.
How you choose to sell it and who you choose to sell it to, there's a million different variables that can impact your own card value. And I could sell it in this manner, today, and then go, if I were to get the card back, sell it in this other manner tomorrow, and it may go for wildly different prices. Yep. That's part of the challenge of this entire thing, right?
That's absolutely part of the challenge.
But everybody wants to know what their cards are worth. Everybody wants to know what they've sold for recently and what they should buy it at or what they should sell at or what the prediction of what their cards may be worth in the future. This is a hard challenge. I know it's one that keeps you up every night.
It really actually does. Unfortunately, we talk about that. Sales data is really, really important. It's really critical. When we were at the National 2 years ago in Atlantic City, there was no Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
We had 100,000 people walking around with no ability to check sales comps. We couldn't demo Market Movers at our booth half of the time.
Yeah,
it was
we paid for Wi-Fi. We had like the premium $5,000 Wi-Fi. It still didn't work half the damn time.
Yeah, we would downloaded a couple of YouTube videos at the hotel and just running them on a loop to show the product. It was a challenge. Everybody was flying blind. Buyers were buying blind. Sellers were buying blind. In a way, it was kind of a cool experiment. It was almost like you got to see like what people really would think a card is worth versus being, relying on comps. But, we used to use the Beckett price guide back in the 90s.
Yep.
Everybody who collected then remembers that.
I was a big time subscriber.
Yep.
Happiest day of the month
Absolutely.
was when the Beckett price guide came in the mail.
I kind of miss the simplicity of that sometimes, but now it's the world of comps. And it is so far from perfect, but it is the best that we have, and comps really matter. I did a video a couple of years ago on the Market Movers channel now. It's hard for me to believe it was 2 years ago, called Card Value Doesn't Come from Historical Sales Data. Kind of a funny video to do as the head of a product team that's relies on sales data. But the truth is it's not perfect, and we're going to get into some of that today. When we talk about our data philosophy, this is something that we tried to set really early as a product team at SCI, but it's also evolved a little bit over time. But it has always been around our customer's voice, which is, can you add more cards? Can you add more cards? When we solicit product feedback from our users and from prospective users, what would you like to see? More cards. The features are great, but without the cards, they don't care. So we're always looking for ways to track more cards and grow our database. Our data team is run by some really smart people. So we have some incredibly smart people when it comes to the hobby overall. I would actually use the word expert to describe our team and how they add cards. What we do is we strive for 95 to 100% accuracy with our data quality, meaning if a sales transaction happened and it exists and it's on one of the marketplaces that we ingest data for, we're getting it. It's the correct price. It's happening in a timely manner, and it's matched to the correct card in our database. We're never going to hit 100% on everything, and there's a whole bunch of reasons why. Now, one thing that's really important, we explain some of those things in our FAQs in Market Movers. We've tried to make sure that that's laid out. And a big thing that we say is always check what we call detailed results or sales history on a particular card, just to make sure there's nothing funky going on. Our overall philosophy is give you all the data and then let you make an informed decision with it, as opposed to what you might describe as trying to like play God and choosing which transactions come in and go out. We do delete some things, and we'll get a little bit more into that. But a few examples of what might cause some challenges on our side, just at a high level to sort of preview this. One, listing title errors. So if somebody else doesn't know what card they have and they mislist it, or they intentionally try to manipulate the listing title to get more eyes on it, and they put in something as a silver prism, but it's a base card or whatever, that's going to get ingested and matched to our data, and then hopefully caught as an outlier, and then we'll review it. Another thing is we're human. We do make mistakes occasionally. We have 3.3 million cards in our featured card database, not even close to where we'd like to be, but that's a lot of cards. So we're obviously going to make mistakes when we set those things up too. And then occasionally there's technology problems. There's problems with APIs. Somebody else who's hosting data and sharing it with us through an API integration, they might fail. Maybe they changed something on their API. Maybe they upgraded their server. Something changed, and now we're not getting the data overnight. So, we got to go talk to them and figure out how to get it. And then same thing on our side. Infrastructure can be really challenging. We've got to scale up our databases appropriately as they grow. We've got to adjust our servers. We've had issues where our servers go down, and that's through no fault of our own. All of those things can lead to what I would call like data reliability issues with the timeliness of the data going in. What I can say, obviously, is when that happens, our team swarms on it to try to get it rectified really quickly. So there's a lot of different things in there. When you look at our data set overall and what we feature in our products, it is by far, and it's not even close, the largest database of its kind available for sports cards. When you talk about that level of accuracy with that many cards. So others may put a lot more attention into a smaller number of cards. Some people put a lot of attention into growing their database, with a ton of cards, but then the pricing's not very good on it. We're trying to find that sweet spot, and that's kind of our overall attitude toward data.
Yeah, and so you've said a couple of really, really interesting kind of key things there. I want to go back to the Beckett price guide comment because I feel like this shows the challenge that exists today, right? When I used to get that Beckett price guide, they could fit the price of really, at that point in time, like we're talking 1990, they could fit the price of pretty much every important card throughout history in a price guide.
In a little magazine.
Yeah. Because of the fact that there was only a few sets per year. And these sets, per sport. And these sets didn't have variations. There weren't parallels. There weren't serial numbered cards. In fact, grading wasn't even a thing. So you would just simply find the set, of which there weren't that many, find the card, and all the key cards were listed, and look at the price. Pricing was super simple up until about the early 1990s. And then all of a sudden, manufacturers started to figure out things like refractors and parallels and serial numbering and inserts and short prints. And these things started to come more heavily in the late 90s. And then they started to come even more heavily in the 2000s. And certainly in the last 10 years, my God, it has gotten absolutely wild with the number of parallels and variations and all that type of thing. I mean, you've got Zion Williamson a few years ago. He had 2019 different rookie cards.
That's right.
Ironically, because 2019 was also his rookie year, that had nothing to do with the fact that he had 2019 different rookie cards if you take into account all of the different inserts and all of the different parallels and variations across all of the different sets. So it's incredible to think, all players like Mickey Mantle have less than 50 cards total that you might find in a price guide, certainly less than 100 cards, if you go back to their playing days years, and then you get to Zion, it's 2019 in just 1 year. Yep. And this is why the database size becomes exponentially insane now versus what it was previously. As you said, we have 3.3 million cards in Market Movers that we're tracking This is why the infrastructure is a challenge. This is why the API connections are a challenge. This is why ensuring the accuracy of all of that data is a challenge, because that's 3.3 million cards that we're tracking times, in some cases, several sales a day. Now some of those cards don't sell but once every 6 months or year, but some of them sell 10 or 20 times a day. And so think about that amount of data. And by the way, 3.3 million cards is still only a fraction,
it's only a fraction
of the total number of sports cards that are out there that exist. And that number is growing and growing and growing every single day. So this puts a lot of pressure. And as you said, philosophically, we had to make a choice early on. Do we go wide and try to serve the needs of the everyday collector and sacrifice a little bit of data accuracy by doing that, allowing some sales that may not be perfectly matched to that card or perfectly legit getting into our data, but we're going wide and we're servicing the need of tons and tons of collectors? Or do we keep the database smaller? Some other companies have chosen to do this and go harder with the verification of accuracy, but then the data only applies to a very much more limited subset of cards.
Yeah.
We chose the breadth, and then empowering collectors to look at specifics themselves before they make a buying decision, especially if it's a significant buying decision.
When you're trying to track your collection, you want the pricing to update.
Yeah.
Right? You want automated pricing updates.
Yeah.
And we do a really good job writing those queries and making sure that that price updates regularly. We also have tools in place with our collection and market movers to enable users to track those cards we're not doing yet. That's a separate conversation, and I talk a lot about that in our videos and things. But, trading card database, I think it was about 2.5 years ago, showed that it had 15 million unique cards in their product catalog and all their card catalog. I believe that number is up over 23 million now. So 50% of the cards in existence have been produced in the last 2.5 years.
Yeah, that's insane.
I mean, that's truly, and so there's a lot there philosophically, and there's challenges I haven't even put into my notes just about like the naming conventions and how manufacturers create those checklists and the inconsistencies, or in some cases, excessive consistencies between one product to the next. That's like, well, when you call something in a product like Panini Select a prism, and then it's a prism in this other product, and somebody doesn't, include the word select in their listing title, like this is where we start maybe getting in to unpack some of these challenges, because it's a lot of cards. We're trying to balance getting the most iconic sets and players of all time from T206 forward, all the way up until every new product release that comes out, which can be a pretty daunting task to stay on top of.
So let's talk about some of those specific challenges. What are some of the bigger challenges with gathering accurate data when it comes to comps and sports card pricing?
Yeah, well, there's a distinction too. I liked the word you used in the intro, like reliable, almost a little bit more than accurate, just because it's like, how do you count on this price, this transaction, as something to bank, your value of your cards on? That's obviously what we're tracking in collection within market movers. But one thing, you've got various marketplaces. Different types of cards do better on different marketplaces. In general, the biggest one obviously is eBay, right? And that's a big marketplace. They're not always transparent, at least from a public-facing perspective, with what a card actually sold for. You don't always see the best offer price, and in some cases, you don't know if the card was actually paid for, which is a big problem. You can see those things if you're logged in through seller tools and an eBay seller tool dashboard, but they don't share it with the public. So you have unpaid items, you have shill bidding, where people are intentionally manipulating the price of cards to hopefully pump up the value of their listings, or they're just trying to get theirs to sell for more. And then you have what we might call like a real sale but a fake sale. So I'm on there and I go, hey, Geoff, why don't you just buy this card for me that I just listed for twice what it's worth, and it'll show up as a real sale on eBay sales. And then when we go to the show this weekend, I can go tell everybody, well, this is what this card's been doing. And believe it or not, that is a real problem going into the National. It is a massive problem going into the National. A lot of people don't know that. You have to be really careful with more common cards, or even in some cases with rare ones. It's like if you see a transaction that happened on a number to 10 flawless or something within the last week of the National, I don't know how much stock I'd put in that price if it happened specifically on eBay in many cases, because people they do that. They go and they sell these cards for fake values or whatever, and they're like, well, I picked this one up last week for this price, so I'm looking to get a little bit. I got to have some, some money on top of this. It's a problem. It's difficult to know what really happened. There's another dynamic where sometimes private sales happen, right? So maybe we're just here and you're like, hey, I just hit this Andre Drummond card, T-Pott, I'll sell it to you for $50. I may not trust that price if somebody comes to me from a data platform perspective and says, I want you to track all these private sales that happen with me, or even the ones that get announced, like the Star Jordan and other things like that. Ultimately, we don't know. And I don't necessarily always trust the public sales that happen through vetted, verified marketplaces. How do I know there's not some kind of market manipulation if you're trying to report a private sale? I've seen situations where cash is exchanged on a table. Those guys, if we were logging that, if they were like, look, I'm giving him the money, that could be to manipulate things. So the private sale dynamic's tricky. And then a final one is just other things like card shops and card shows in general, whatnot, other platforms like that. We don't have any availability right now to their card data. We are looking at incorporating Cards HQ data into our products, which would be a really exciting development.
Yeah, which we absolutely are working on. We're excited about that. But yeah, it's a challenge because then you also miss part of the market there. I know a lot of people, we do these whatnot streams. I just did one recently where I was live on there, sold a ton of cards, and everyone in the stream's like, are these cards is this sales history of all these transactions going to go into market movers? And I wish that it could. Whatnot doesn't make it available for anybody, to take and grab. And obviously at a place like a card show where you're dealing with cash transactions and, customer to dealer, it's not actually being recorded anywhere. It's impossible to get any of that data reliably and at scale and be able to get into that. So no pricing tool is able to show you 100% of everything that's happening in the sports card market. I wish they could. I wish our own products could do that. They can't, but they can show you at least what's happening online, and they could show you at least what's happening through a whole bunch of different vetted marketplaces. Now, not every sale, as you just said, is accurate and is a comp that you should rely on, or at least I should say reliable. Yeah, it's a reliable comp that you should rely on for all of those reasons. But if you do at least have enough data on a particular card, can you trust that data that you do have? Let's say you've got data for, a particular card that you're trying to buy, and you look up the recent sales of that card in a product like Market Movers, looking up recent sales, seeing that there are some sales there. Does that give you enough accuracy to be able to predict what your copy of that same card would sell for if you were to go out and sell it tomorrow?
People ask me all the time on our member live streams. We have Ask Me Anythings at shows in the shop. You guys ever planning to put any kind of a Market Movers value or a predictive price into Market Movers? What if the card hasn't sold in 6 months? Why don't you guys try to tell us what the card should be worth? And my reaction to that is always, I don't really want anything to do with that. I don't want to tell somebody else what their card should be worth. We're not even doing that now. We're just reporting sales comp data and trying to give people tools to deduce what it could be worth. And the reason I don't want anything to do with that is because the card market in this sort of like free market economy dynamic with it is highly irrational. It doesn't, there are so many inconsistencies from one thing to the next. You can have a case, for example, where a Prism Silver of a particular player sells for 3.5 times what his base Prism does in same PSA 10 condition, and another one might be 7 from the same year. Mm-hmm. Like it could be Zion and Ja have totally different ratios between those two types of cards. A lot of that stuff tends to happen that doesn't add up, and when you start trying to do predictive pricing, there are so many other factors that can skew that, and then you have this sort of ripple effect, this domino effect that can happen with other cards. Think about when John Morant's Chronicles card with Key Glock and Young Dolph and these guys in the background blew up in popularity. If we were using like some kind of index anchoring or something else to, ratios to drive that value, that could lead to it skewing Zion Williamson's predictive pricing or other players.
Or at least all of other John Morant's cards when it had nothing
cards.
to do with those other cards.
These factors there's so much nuance to it. So that's one piece. We just have chosen to stay away from predictive pricing for that reason.
And the predictive pricing that's out there doesn't have very good accuracy right now. There's other companies that attempt to do that. I've seen accuracy rates between about 60 and 70%.
Yeah.
Which means that most of the time those cards are off 30 to 40% from what they would actually sell for. That's a huge delta.
Right.
That's a massive, massive, scary delta for you to be like, yeah, I think my card's worth 10 grand based upon this estimated sales value, but history would tell me that that's off somewhere between $3,000 to $4,000.
That's right.
You know, in terms of what that actually is going to sell for if it goes out, you know, at auction today or something like that.
So one thing we'll do when we have a card that hasn't sold in a while is we'll use market movers and we'll say, look, John Morant's cards overall are up, 18% in the last 365 days. Maybe we use that as a data point to help inform a negotiation, right, and get to a spot where both dealers are both people are comfortable. But what we don't do is like rely on that as creed. And if you have too small of a data set, meaning you're only tracking 10 of a player's cards, and then you try to use an index ratio or something to say this player's cards are up, your sample set's not big enough. There's too many. Now, if you start saying it's on 100 cards or 1,000 cards or 5,000 cards and it's over a period of time, that becomes a more reliable tool to try to factor that in with other calculations. But that's right. When you have something, it's like, oh, our overall accuracy rate on this, compared to recent sales has been 65, 70, 75%. You're losing out on a lot of money potentially. There are other ways to do that and to kind of triangulate what you think something's going to be worth. And a lot of times when that happens, it is between a buyer and a seller in a negotiation, whether that's online or in person.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that takes some expertise. That takes some experience. Yeah. We try to educate as best we can on people doing that. Yeah. And there's a lot of other factors as well. I mean, even things as simple as, what time of the day an auction closed. Yeah. If somebody puts a card on eBay and it's closing, Saturday morning at 8:28 a.m.
Tuesday at 5:23.
Right. In the morning. Then and so then like I sometimes I'll see a card that I own that's currently for sale at auction, and I'll look at it and go, oh, this is going to be a disaster for me, because this person who put this same card up at auction has it ending at a weird time, has done a poor job of describing the card in the title, and the photo isn't great quality. And I'm like, that combination of things is going to cause this card to sell for maybe 20, maybe 30% less than it should be worth. And then as a result, it's going to potentially drag the value of my card down with it, because if I were to try to go sell my card the following week, people are going to look up pricing history, they're going to look at comps, and they're going to see, oh, well, that just sold last week for this price, so it's only worth that price.
They have 3 eBay feedback and they live in Estonia.
Yeah, and, like, and that's the other thing, right? I mean, that's the other thing, and you get international sales, you get all kinds of weird things that happen. And then sometimes it works in reverse. Sometimes a card will sell for an extremely high amount of money, and it's hard to explain why. And it's not, though, always shill bidding or some type of market manipulation. Sometimes it's just that 2 people really wanted that card.
Yeah.
And so that card went up and up, and it legitimately sold at that price. 2 people were fighting over that card. They wanted the card. Maybe it's one that doesn't sell very often. That's right. And it sold for kind of an outlandish price based upon what it probably should sell for in the market. But 2 people really believed in that card and wanted it.
Yeah. Yeah, those are all good, really good points. The timing, the marketplace. And like we said earlier, different marketplaces do better for different types of cards. We see high-end notable cards go to big auction houses, whereas we see things kind of in that 2,000 and under range typically go on eBay. I've seen so many cards come through our market movers data as an outlier for us to review, where a card that regularly transacts for $70 to $80 on eBay just sold for $27 at an auction house.
Yeah,
because nobody's looking at those particular cards in some cases, or like sometimes the flip happens where there's a particular clientele who they're sort of a dedicated patron of an auction house and they like to buy on there. And those people in many cases don't even do comp. They're like, I don't do comps. They just like to buy cards. They collect. They like to buy in volume, whatever. So maybe the card sells for $27 on eBay regularly, and it ends up going for $55, $60 on that. It can happen in both directions. but that can cause a lot of variability from one marketplace to the next. And when it comes down to it, you have, there's supply variability. You talked about this. There are cases with like some Patrick Mahomes cards or other cards that come up, and I'm just using him as an example to shift to another sport. Maybe it's 2 cards serial numbered to the same number. They're both serial numbered to 25, rookie cards of Mahomes. But for whatever reason, one of them sells every 2 to 3 months in some condition, and the other one only sells every 2 years. The one that only sells every 2 years, that's a totally different ballgame. It's a lot more difficult to predict what that card's going to go for, but that's a card that apparently either just didn't get pulled as much out of packs and doesn't exist out there in circulation, or, people just are interested in holding that card long term versus these other ones. So supply variability can be a big factor. And then marketplace variability we already talked about. Ultimately, without saying just sell your cards to figure out what it's worth, there's a little more science to it. One is obviously scarcity. Scarcity being the sort of intersection between the rarity of a card, which can mean it's low print run, serial number to 10 or something else, just a low print run card, or low pop, meaning in the top pristine, gem mint condition, there's very few of them. And then demand. And demand is kind of a fusion of like the hype around a card, the iconic nature of the card, the sort of inherent desirability, as well as just the number of buyers available. Meaning, as the sports card hobby becomes more popular and there are just more people interested in buying cards, that's going to drive demand up for a given card. The other piece that's really important, so scarcity and then exposure. So you got to have, notoriety of a marketplace. If I try to go sell a Patrick Mahomes gold rookie numbered to 10 on Mercari, that's not going to do very well, right? Maybe it'll sit out there. Or if I try to auction it on a website that's not, really known for sports cards or something, why would I do that, right? You want to sell it on a reputable place where it's going to have eyes on it. And other things can really impact that, like the ease of use of a particular software tool, like a website or an app for those different marketplaces. I won't, name who it was, but everybody's got their challenges. I was trying to look at some cards I might like to buy and doing some exploring on a particular marketplace. I set the filters on the mobile app. I was going through and clicking on them. There's no ability to save searches. And then when I was off and doing other stuff and came back later, the app had refreshed and cleared sort of the local cache on the app and reset all my filters, and I literally just gave up. That happened to me twice, and I eventually just gave up trying to go through and kind of scour things. I was like, well, I guess I'm not going to be able to buy effectively on this app right now because I keep losing where I left off, and the app's not conducive to supporting me. So that can be a challenge. And then some of these places will put marketing behind specific cards. That could mean something as simple as taking a really nice video of the card to go with it if it's a higher dollar card, telling a little narrative and giving you some information as a buyer about what makes it unique. They'll do promo videos, social media plugs. That type of stuff can obviously really impact the value of a card. And then another big factor is the economy. That's the other kind of wild card in everything. And different factors and different economic conditions can affect different tiers of cards. So it's not that all price brackets of cards follow the same trends. If you have a situation where middle class is struggling and inflation's going up and just general cost of living has increased significantly, that can affect cards, $100 and under, right? Because that's sort of the tier that maybe that class of people are playing in. Whereas like high-end market might not be as impacted by that type of a dynamic. Other factors might impact high-end market, whereas the lower end kind of stays. So that's all those different factors roll into determining the value of a card at a given point in time. Plus a lot of those other challenges that you outlined.
Yeah. It's you're right. You're absolutely right. I mean, there's a ton of different impact. And going back to the idea of just the two people bidding against each other, which an auction ultimately comes down to.
Yep.
I've had the experience, I imagine you've had as well, where I bid only up to a certain point on a card, and I was the underbidder. It sold for just above whatever my maximum bid is. And then the next day, I'm kind of kicking myself and saying, man, I would have paid more for that card.
Yep.
If that card went back up for auction again tonight, I would go 20 or 30% more because now I'm in this regret mode that I didn't get the card. Or maybe I put in a snipe type bid and just don't do it enough. And so, that right there affects it. Had I been a little more aggressive about my bidding the night before, that card might have gone for 30% more because I would have gotten it at 30% more, or I would have forced the winning bidder up 30% more, right? I'm sure you've had that experience before.
I think everybody listening who's ever bought a sports card has had that happen. And I had one similarly where, for whatever reason, I didn't have mobile notifications enabled for a particular app. So I was in extended bidding, and I had planned to bid more, but was kind of watching. And there's a game you play sometimes when you're bidding on cards, on an auction site and things. So I was bidding on this card. I was ready to go up, probably another 25, 30% from where the price was. And then I came back too late, and I never got a mobile notification because for some reason it was off on my phone. I thought I had it enabled, and I lost the card. And it's not a card that comes up. It was actually the highest graded version of the card, and it never comes up for sale. It was a platinum medallion numbered to 50, and I was just like, well, I would have paid more for that card. So you kind of come back to that dynamic of like, in this theoretical world, many cards might actually be worth more than what they sell for.
Yeah, you never know. Yeah, so all of these things said, right? All of these different reasons that we've gone through today during the episode of why cards sometimes sell for more or less, or the last sale may not be actually accurately reflective of what something might sell for the following day. How do you bring all these different concepts back? And you've talked a little bit about this, but as you're looking at our own data products, as we're looking at Market Movers, as we're looking at the Sports Card Investor app, as we're looking at the price guide on our website, how do we bring that back into play with what we're trying to provide our customers?
Yeah, so first of all, eBay does like 150,000 sales a day, and those are getting ingested into our sales history. And then you have all the other sales marketplaces too. We have 3.3 million cards now in our database that I said, and tens of thousands of sealed products that we track prices on as well. So like I said, we have the biggest database of its kind. It's not even 10% of what we want it to be when you think about all the grade permutations and cards in existence, or what really the hobby needs that database to be. We chose not to scrutinize every transaction that comes through to make sure that it looks, totally legit. What we do is we have kind of an algorithmic boundary set up for outliers that come in, and it's not the same as a card that goes up versus down. So it's more uncommon for a card to drop rapidly suddenly from one day to the next than to go up. So we sort of adjust for that. But we've fine-tuned it pretty well now to where outliers come into a review queue, and our team is reviewing thousands of transactions every day for outliers, sales outliers. And they look, first of all, just to make sure it's actually the correct card, that it wasn't a weird listing title or an error on our part, what they would then fix. So that's really easy. We have the two pictures next to each other, and they go, no, yes, accept it, whatever. And then we look at other things that might look funny from a pricing perspective. Like if I see that some Karl Anthony Towns card just sold for $300, and that was a 100% increase, we can click right from that admin screen out to eBay to see, are there any other buy it nows right now available for sale for less than that, significantly less? And if we go out to eBay and I see, oh, there's 3 of them for sale for $160, $180, and $210, there's no way somebody just paid $300 for this card. We're going to remove that sale from our data in that case. And so that's kind of the things. Then we'll look at, in some cases, like buyer feedback score on an auction. If it's 0 or 1, if there's some kind of funny business, we have the same people reviewing these outliers every day. So if they see the same type of card coming in and it's getting relisted over and over again, Trae Young's had a big problem with some market manipulation attempts over the last really 2 years. There's certain players we keep a closer eye on. All those kind of things, factor into how we make that decision about what we're going to do. But that's kind of our approach overall. We're trying to scrutinize the data. We're trying to let people make those decisions. And then if our users see a transaction that looks wrong or a missing transaction, they can always report that to us. They can just email our support box, or there's actually a form embedded into Market Movers to submit, those types of things too. So it's something we're obviously continuing to fine tune. We just added some more resources to our data team to help with that process, and something that's really important to us. We want the data to be the highest quality, and as we've met and talked about our strategy meetings, that's really been the theme and focus of our strategy for our products in 2024.
Yeah. And I know we're looking at doing some implementation of AI down the road. Anything we can do to help make this whole process more reliable, more accurate, we want to do. But ultimately, at the end of the day, no matter how good the technology gets, because of all of the factors that we talked about, it's never 100% reliable.
Yeah.
Because there's the human element to all of this. And as you said at the very beginning of the conversation today, what your card is worth is ultimately what someone's going to pay for that card. That's ultimately what it's worth. It's not necessarily worth what it sold for yesterday. Who knows the circumstances, around that. It's what somebody's going to pay for your card right now if you go try to sell it. And by the way, what that's worth today may be different tomorrow and may be different the next day and may be different on eBay versus Golden and may be different at a card show versus, selling it selling it to a card shop or whatever that looks like, right? It's always going to be a little bit different. But as you become better with understanding those factors and being able to see the data, read the data, analyze the data, you get a better sense. Never 100%, but you get a better sense of what that likely means for your cards and your collection value.
Yeah. I mean, if it's for your collection, ultimately go with your gut, kind of your intuition, especially if you've been doing it a while. It's going to be your card. So what is it worth to you? What is the card worth to you? Use sales history, use sales comps to inform your decision so that you're not, kind of getting hosed. Nobody wants to overpay for a card that they're buying for their collection. So if there's a possibility this might resurface at half of what somebody's offering it to you, maybe you want to wait, but go with your gut and just don't overpay for anything that you're not comfortable with. If you're newer and you're unsure, and especially if you're looking at buying higher dollar cards, try to find some friends. Try to make some good hobby friends. I have a lot of those at this point. I have people who call me and they'll text me and say, hey, can I just pick your brain on this, for 5 minutes, like, what to do with this, and they'll give me a call or something. Try to build that little network of people that you can count on when it comes to that stuff too, just to bounce ideas off of them, especially for cards that are rare or don't sell often. That can be really valuable to get their advice as well.
Absolutely. This has been helpful, T-Pott. I appreciate it. I know we've been wanting to do this episode for a bit, and hopefully the audience found some value in it. I'm sure they did. It's a complex world of card pricing, but I appreciate you peeling back the covers on it a little bit.
Go check out that video I did on the Market Movers channel a couple of years ago. I don't know, it's somewhere. I said earlier what it's called, but why sales history isn't the value of a card, because I had a lot of fun little charts and things to help illustrate this, and that was a really well received video when I did it back then.
Awesome. There you go. Go check that out on the Market Movers YouTube channel. And folks, we appreciate you watching today's episode or listening to today's episode. And as a reminder, you can listen to these episodes on Spotify and on Apple Podcasts, as well as watch the full-length videos on the Geoff Wilson Show on YouTube. So make sure you are subscribed everywhere. We appreciate you, and we will see you soon with our next one. Take care.